Welcome back to Spring Into Math 5. This is Mr. Stein. We're going to wrap up Chapter 12 and actually our videos for this year with a Chapter 12 review. Okay, as always, we're going to touch on every single video that we did. So if you need to go back and see really the same thing but in a slower, more in-depth pace, go do so. All right, so we started off with the classification of solid figures. Okay, so we talked about a polygon and that it's simply just a closed figure with 3 or more line, and I added line segments because really that's what they are. So then you think like a triangle is a polygon and a quadrilateral is one also. So let's kind of classify the 8 different ones we're going to talk about. All right, now remember, keep track of the prefix tri and quad and all the other ones. So a triangle has 3 sides, tri means 3. So a triangle is a 3-sided polygon. Okay, a quadrilateral, quad means 4, and a quadrilateral has 4 sides. Okay, a pentagon has 5 sides. Pent means 5, and penta has 5 letters, if that helps you. Okay, hexagon has 6 sides. Hex means 6, and hex and 6 have an X, so a hexagon is a 6-sided object, or excuse me, polygon. All right, the 5th one we're going to talk about is a heptagon. Hept means 7. A heptagon has 7 sides. Okay, octagon, pretty much everyone knows. An octopus has 8 legs. An octagon has 8 sides. Oct means 8. Okay, nonagon has 9 sides. That's kind of a new one. Think non sounds kind of like 9. It has the same letters. So a nonagon has 9 sides. And the last one we're going to talk about is a decagon that has 10 sides. A decade is 10 years. Dec means 10, and decagon has 10 sides. Okay, so now let's classify the quadrilaterals. So a quadrilateral is a closed figure with 4 sides and 4 vertices. So the vertex is a point where the line segments meet. The points where the sides of the quadrilateral meet are called the vertices. Now, the prefix quad means 4, so keep that in mind. So you can always remember that a quadrilateral is a 4-sided figure because of this prefix, quad. So each quadrilateral has 4 sides and 4 angles. All right, so you can see here we have a quadrilateral. This one's labeled A, B, C, and D. So the quadrilateral has 4 angles. You name the angles by the angle symbol and the letter of each vertex. So that figure was, or is, angle A, angle B, angle C, and angle D. Now, a quadrilateral has 4 vertices as well, and they're named by their letters, and it's the same, A, B, C, and D. All right, now, naming a quadrilateral uses small quadrilateral symbol and the 4 letters of the vertices. Now, the quadrilateral symbol is just a square, and then you just name the vertices. In this case, you have your little square, your quadrilateral symbol, and A, B, C, and D. Now, a quadrilateral has 4 sides, and the sides are named by the endpoints of each line. So you'd have side AB, BD, CD, and AC. And as you can see here, you just kind of go in alphabetical order. And then if I were to really write it, I think it's better if you write A angle, or excuse me, side AB, and you put the line above it because it's a line segment. Now, there are several different kinds of quadrilaterals. So quadrilaterals are classified and identified based on angles and side length. So while each 4-sided figure is a quadrilateral, sometimes there is a name that is more specific than just simply quadrilateral. So a parallelogram is a quadrilateral with opposite sides that are parallel and congruent. And we're going to go over this word again and again. So congruent means exactly the same. So in this case, a parallelogram has opposite sides that are parallel and congruent, meaning that they're the same. All right, so this is a parallelogram. A good way to remember is it's like a rectangle that somebody sat on and squished a little bit. Right? So a rectangle is a parallelogram with 4 right angles. Now, you all pretty much know what a rectangle is, but think about it in terms of you have opposite sides that are parallel, you have opposite sides that are congruent, and it has 4 right angles. So we're going to build on just your basic knowledge of what a rectangle is. Now, a square is a rectangle with 4 congruent sides and 4 right angles. Now, and it's going to have opposite sides that are parallel. Now, the reason we're really building on it when we talk about angles and side lengths and congruence and parallel and perpendicular and those types of things is that some of these objects can be more than one thing. So a square is a rectangle and is a parallelogram because it meets the criteria for all of those things. Now, a rhombus is a parallelogram with 4 congruent sides. Now, a square is also a rhombus because it has 4 congruent sides. It just happens to have 4 right angles. And again, a rhombus, a good way to remember a rhombus is it's like a square that somebody sat on. I always think of it like a box. When you sit on a box, it kind of bends a little or it kind of tilts. Now, a trapezoid is a parallelogram with 1 pair of opposite sides parallel. Okay, and a good way to remember a trapezoid is you have two parallel lines, two perpendicular lines, which means they're going to cross at some point, and then you have, two of the lines on the opposite side are the same, and then you have a short one at the top or the bottom, or I guess technically on one of the sides. Okay, now let's talk angle classification. An angle is formed when two rays connect at a single endpoint. We talked that before. You can measure an angle in degrees. Now, when measuring an angle, you're measuring the space between two rays. So, the arc represents the space of the angle that you're measuring. So the angle is very small. You can see here that the arc is small. And they go together. So if the arc's big, like in this one, the angle is going to be larger. Now, you can classify or organize, and classify is just a fancy, essential way to say organize. So you can classify or organize angles according to the size of the angle. Now, the size of the angle is classified according to the number of degrees. Now, there are four major types of angles. Okay, first we have a right angle. And this is an angle that is exactly 90 degrees, and this one's probably one of the easiest to spot because it has that square corner. Okay, then we have acute, and I always teach people it's a cute little angle, it's less than 90 degrees. So when you think acute angle, it's kind of weird to think about, but it's greater than 0, because greater would just basically almost be two rays on top of each other. So it's greater than 0, which would be 1, all the way up to 89, because once it hits 90, it's right. So it's less than a 90 degree angle, less than 90, greater than 0. Okay, a straight angle is essentially a straight line, and a straight line is equal to 180 degrees. We talked before, if you think about a right angle, which is a square corner standing right up in, vertical and horizontal, you have two 90 degrees. Well, two 90s would equal 180. And an obtuse angle is an angle that is greater than 90 degrees but less than 180. So you're talking 91 to 179. So anything from 91 all the way to 179. Once it hits 90, it's right, and once it hits 180, it's obviously going to be straight. Okay, let's talk about classifying triangles by angles. Now, a triangle means three angles. So a prefix tri means three. Now, to classify a triangle according to its angles, you must look at the angles inside the triangle. Use the number of degrees in these angles to classify the triangles. And then next, as you know, we're going to talk about classifying them by side length. All right, so we're looking at the measure of each angle inside the triangle to try to figure out what it is. And so hopefully you're looking at this one and saying, ooh, I know this one's equilateral and acute, and we'll get to that in a sec. So there are four types of triangles based on angle measures. Now, a right triangle is a triangle that has one right angle and two acute angles. So once you have that right angle, you're basically going to have acute angles, just based on how it's going to work. Because remember, and you probably already know this because we talked about it a couple lessons ago, that a triangle is going to equal 180 degrees. So a right triangle is going to be a triangle that has one right angle. Now, let's look at an example of a right triangle. You see here we have our square corner, which we know is 90, and two 45s. Okay, so then we talked before that the sum of the angles is going to equal 180. So if I had two angles that are 45, 45 plus 45 is 90, and 90 plus 90 is 180. So the sum of the three angles of this triangle, and technically of any triangle, is 180 degrees. All right, so in an equilateral triangle, all three side angles are equal. Okay, so the three angles of this triangle are equal. So in the equilateral triangle, you know that the sum of the angles is 180. And if you think about it, if I take 180 and I divide it by 3, I'm going to get 60. So all the side angles, or all the angles rather, are going to be 60. All right, so in an acute triangle, all three angles of the triangle are less than 90 degrees. So you can see here, 80 is less than 90, 67, and 33. So I have all three angles are going to be less than 90 degrees. So it's an acute triangle. Now, all the angles, if I add them up, we have 67 plus 33 is 100. 100 plus 80 is 180. Simple math. If you have to write it down, no problem. Sometimes you're going to have to because they're going to be kind of all over the map in terms of what the sum of what the angles look like, but they're always going to equal to 180 degrees. And as you get further in math, I love it because since you know they equal 180 degrees, if I took one of the side lengths out, you could actually figure it out just by adding the other two and subtracting from 180. All right, so we also have an obtuse triangle, and an obtuse triangle has one angle that is greater than 90 and then two angles that are less than 90. Now, let's talk about classifying them by sides. We talked angles a second ago, let's talk sides. All right, so we know we can use lengths of the sides to help us classify triangles just like we used angles. So let's look at how to classify triangles according to side length. All right, so first we have an equilateral triangle. And an equilateral triangle, all the sides are going to be the same. They're going to be equal. Equilateral sounds like equal. That I think is probably one of the easiest ones to remember just because the word equilateral sounds like equal. Okay, next we have a scalene triangle. And in a scalene triangle is a triangle where the side lengths are all different. So you can see here, shown by my tallies, one side has 1, one side has 2, and the other has 3. So all 3 sides of this triangle are different, so it's a scalene triangle. Next we have an isosceles triangle, and this has 2 side lengths that are the same and 1 side length that is different. So we know isosceles is going to have 1 side length different and 2 that are the same. Okay, so that's going to do it for this review of Chapter 12. Thank you for joining us for Spring Into Math 5. I hope to see you next year for Spring Into Math 6. Little hint, it's me.